Good morning, everyone. It is great to be here with you this morning. As Matt said, I had to rep our new volunteer t-shirts. So if you volunteer here at Newport and you have not gotten one of our t-shirts yet, let me know or let one of our staff know. We'd love to get you one. And if you look on the back, this year we are really focusing on following Jesus. What does it look like to make Jesus famous? What does it look like to follow him? And so over the past couple months here, Pastor Merle has spoken a lot on who Jesus is and different parts of his identity, and we're going to continue to focus on that this year. And I wanted to wear it this morning because we're going to talk more about who Jesus is this morning. And there's something about even just wearing a t-shirt that says, hey, I'm following Jesus. This is who is my teacher. This is who is my Lord. This is the one that I am following. And it's like that declaration that we make. And obviously wearing a t-shirt's a pretty simple thing, but in our hearts and in our walks, whether it's at work or at school, having that, this is who I follow. This is who is leading me. And also, wearing a t-shirt while preaching, it gets hot up here, so this is great. So this week, my wife's family came to visit, and Megan's actually preaching at another church this morning, so I'm flying solo, but her family came in yesterday, and I don't know if you have this, if you're married, if you've had this with your in-laws, but when you get married, you have a tendency, you kind of have to learn your in-laws' language around like terms and things they say and ways they do things. And Megan's mom was driving in yesterday from Ohio, and she is giving us updates on like her progress of coming into town, and her updates are mile markers. So she would tell us, she's on the PA Turnpike, she would say, I'm at mile marker 50, or I'm at mile marker 140. And Megan, who went to college here and went back regularly to Ohio, was very used to, okay, I know exactly when she says she's at mile marker 50, I know exactly where that's at. She's going to be here in like 3 hours. I was sitting there thinking, why don't you just give me like your ETA? Like, I don't need to know specifically the mile marker that you're at. I just need to know what time you're going to walk through my door. And so we had this conversation. We were going back and forth a little bit yesterday. I was teasing her a bit about, some family quirks. But I realized, if this is the language her family speaks, I better learn the mile markers on the PA Turnpike, because when my in-laws are coming, I want to know when they're going to walk through the door. I don't want to be wondering, is it going to be, 5 hours from now or 20 minutes from now? I need to know when they're going to walk through. And as we follow Jesus, sometimes it feels like we're having to learn a new system of thinking, a new, a different way of approaching things, a different way of doing things. And we have to allow ourselves to be transformed, to take on a different way of seeing things in order to follow him. And so, anyways, that was just something that happened this week that I thought was kind of funny. Megan's not here this morning, so I will try not to tell too many stories about her, but that just made me laugh with a little family quirk. So this morning, I want to start by reading in John 15. And like I said, we've been talking about a lot this year about what it looks like to follow Jesus, who Jesus is. And this morning, we're going to really look at what does it look like to abide in Jesus? What does it look like to remain in him, to remain in his love, to have him abide in us? And so I want to start with John 15. It's a beautiful passage of Scripture. We're just going to read a few verses here. But starting in John 15, verse 5, it says, this is Jesus talking, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And he goes on in verse 9, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this, so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Abiding in Jesus' love, abiding in who he is, allowing him to abide in us in that place of remaining in him. And, sometimes we read this verse, particularly in verse 10, where it says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. And I think sometimes we can get into a legalistic mindset around it of like, okay, I have to do everything right, because if I'm not doing everything right, I'm not abiding in his love. And I think there's actually an aspect of, as we abide in his love, we trust him, we walk in relationship with him, we keep his commandments. And it's like a parent who, they tell their child not to run out in the street, and the child, when they're really young, they might not understand why they shouldn't. They might not understand the rule that their parent's putting in place, but if they love their parent, if they trust their parent, they're going to listen to their parent. And as we love the Lord, as we remain in the Lord, there might be things that we don't understand why he commands that or why he says that, but we're going to trust him, and we're going to walk out his commandments because we love him. In verse 5, when Jesus talks about remaining in him to bear much fruit, because apart from him, we can do nothing. Do we recognize on a daily basis our need for abiding in God? I was thinking about this week. How often do I take moments in my day to recognize, Lord, I don't want to do anything apart from you. I don't want to make decisions. I don't want to walk into conversations. I don't want to go into my job apart from living in a place of abiding in you, because I need your grace each and every day. Because when I don't abide in you, when I don't live in that place, that's where anxiety comes, that's where stress comes, that's where it's so easy to get distracted, it's so easy to get put off course. But there's something about when you're willing to abide, when you're willing to remain in the Lord, that helps direct our paths. In 1 John 2, verse 5, John writes, by this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. Following Jesus is a journey. It's a path that we get to walk. It's a willingness to learn his ways, to learn his thought processes, to learn how he handles situations. My wife and I, when we first got married, we were learning how to merge two households and what it looks like. We got married a little bit later in life. She was 30, I was 27, and we had both been living on our own independently for like 8 or 9 years at that point. And so we both had our own ways of doing finances. We both had our own ways of cleaning, all those different things. And so one of the things that we decided was we want to get some good wisdom on how to handle our finances, how to manage it well. And so we started listening to some Dave Ramsey things and some Dave Ramsey teachings and things like that. And it was really funny because the more I listened to Dave Ramsey, if you're familiar, he's like a financial consultant, coach, things. He has a radio show, so there's lots of podcasts and books and different things. But the more that we listened to it, the more when financial situations came up, I would like hear Dave's voice in my head. And it would be like, and if you have ever heard Dave Ramsey talk, he's a very direct person. And so if I was about to make a stupid choice, I would almost hear Dave's voice in the back of my head being like, don't pay the stupid tax, don't do it. Like there was like, almost like I could hear Dave coaching me, even though obviously I've never met Dave. And it got me thinking, like, do we have that inner voice of the Holy Spirit directing us? Where as we've read his word, and obviously Dave wasn't talking to me, the Holy Spirit talks to us. He talks directly to us. And so do we know his word well enough that as situations come up, we can hear the voice of the Lord speaking into situations, that we're attuned to what he's saying, that we have a desire of, oh, this is the way I want to walk. I want to walk in the way that Jesus walks, and so I'm going to look for his way of doing things, the way that he is moving. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of noise on how we should live our lives right now. I think Barry Whistler, who was here a few weeks ago, quoted John Eldredge on, so many of us now, we've become disciples of the internet, where we have allowed the internet, whether it's social media, whether it's news, whatever it is, to really form us, to form our walks, to form our lives. And it's essentially discipled us. And there is a need for us to go back to being discipled by Jesus, to go back to being discipled by the ways of Jesus, by how he handles situations. It can be really easy to go to the internet and say, well, how should I handle this? Or how should I do this? Or it can be really easy to go to so many different sources, and you'll find so many different opinions on how to do things. But will we take the time to go to the Lord to really seek his way of doing things? For many of us, we allow our environments to shape our worldview, our theology, and our emotions. And sometimes our environments and our circumstances are going to be challenging, but we need to have an anchor point that we go back to. One of the best examples of being shaped in the right way, of being formed in the right way, being anchored in the right way, comes when we look at the life of the Apostle Paul. He is responsible for writing a lot of the New Testament. And if you look at Paul's life, he lived a pretty hard life. Like, he was traveling a lot all over the place. He was stoned. He was shipwrecked. He was thrown in prison. We're going to read here in Philippians, when he wrote this book, he was under house arrest in Rome. This was someone that had a lot of hard things happen to him. And even the environment he was in, being under house arrest, was probably not the ideal situation for someone to live in. But this is what Paul says in Philippians 4, verse 11. I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Paul is saying here, I have learned how to follow Jesus. I have learned how to follow Jesus. I'm not getting buffeted around by the situations or the circumstances. I've had good times and I've had hard times. But I have learned that apart from Jesus, I can do nothing. He's the one that strengthens me. In Ephesians 3, 16 through 19, Paul says that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. That no matter what your environment looks like, no matter what your circumstance is, that you would be able to experience all the fullness of God, that you'd be able to be filled with all the fullness of God, because it's not dependent on the situation that you're in. It's not dependent on the environment that you're in. It's not dependent on the circumstances that you're in. I think another great example of this is if we look at the life of David. And David's story is amazing. There's so many different parts we could look at, but the one that I want to focus on today is a season where David was running away from King Saul, and he goes to this foreign land it's called Gath, and he's before this pagan king, and David gets scared that this king is going to kill him or put him in prison, and so he actually pretends to be insane. So he acts insane, and the king's like, I don't know who this crazy person is that you brought to me, but get him out. And so they basically throw David out of this country, and then he goes back to running again. So that's the story in a really quick nutshell. You can read it in 1 Samuel 21. And so David is on the run again. He's running away from Saul because Saul is the king of Israel, and Saul is trying to kill him. So David is having to run away from Saul, and he writes in Psalm 34, it's an amazing psalm when you realize the context. This is not King David sitting on his throne with all the comforts of being king or all the prestige of being king. This is David hiding in a cave in the wilderness. And this is what he says in Psalm 34, verse 10. The lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. I don't know about you, but when I'm in seasons where it feels like a wilderness season, or it feels like a season where there's a struggle, or it's a tough environment, or it's a difficult circumstance, my heart posture isn't normally to be like, wow, the Lord is so good in this moment. That's not normally my response, and yet this is how David responds, and we know that David was a man after God's own heart. And I think what we see in the story of David is somebody that looked through his environment, that looked through his circumstances, and looked towards the character of God. He looked towards the character of God. He looked towards the promises of God. He didn't allow what he was walking through to define who God was. Instead, he proclaimed, no, this is who God is. And it's not that my circumstances don't matter, that my environment doesn't matter, but it's where I'm going to place my focus. I'm going to look through the circumstance. I'm going to look through the environment towards who God is. And that is what I'm going to anchor into. That is what I'm going to stand on. Our circumstances, our environments don't set God's character. As we remain and abide in God, we see past our circumstances to who God is. Then we can abide in who he is. We can experience his calmness, his tone for our environment. I was flying recently, a couple years ago, and I fly on a pretty regular basis, like, a couple times a year. And so I'm not unused to flying. This is not something that, is strange for me. And we were on the airplane, and it was like an 8-hour flight. And we get an hour into the flight, and it was dinner time, so they start serving dinner. And, everyone gets their food, and we were in the back of the plane, so we were like some of the last ones to get our food. And all of a sudden, we just hit really, really bad turbulence. Like the kind of turbulence where the plane just starts dropping, and you just are like kind of bouncing the whole time. And so we're flying along, and 10 minutes go by, and then 20 minutes go by, and 30 minutes go by, and like I'm trying to eat my food, and Megan at this point has just given up because like you couldn't you were like having to hold your tray because it was moving around and stuff. And if you've been on airplanes, you know that air sickness is very real, and so slowly around the plane, people just start throwing up, and there's probably 6 people in our section that are all starting to throw up. With once again, you have food in front of you, so there's like all this just nausea. It's a fun experience for everybody, right? And so we are all there, and we're all kind of experiencing this little bit of chaos. I don't think anyone was really scared or really stressed at this point, but everyone is like, this is really uncomfortable. This is really uncomfortable to sit here with food. I can't move. I've got stuff flowing around. I've got people that are throwing up next to me. This is not fun. And so finally the pilot comes on, and I've never heard a pilot say this before, but he's like, hey, we're in some turbulence right now. I called air traffic control, and I asked them to change our route because the turbulence is so bad, and they told me no. So we're going to be on this route. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but I want you to know that everything is okay. The plane is okay. We're okay. Everything's fine. It's just going to be a bumpy ride. And he said that, and once again, I don't think anyone was really scared at that point, but it did just bring some calm. It's okay, there's somebody flying the plane. There's somebody that's in control. There's somebody that's checking in on things. There's someone that, they're aware of what's happening, and they're in control, and everything's okay. And you've probably heard the term of calm is contagious. And I think sometimes in our walk, we just need to take a minute, and we need to hear the Father's voice. We need to hear him speak into situations so we can experience his calm. Just like that pilot speaking into kind of the chaos that was happening in the cabin. And the situation didn't change. Things were still rocky. Things were still crazy. But there was a calmness that came. And sometimes in our walk with the Lord, we just need to hear his calmness, his voice speak in to our situation. I was, this week, I got home one night, and I made the mistake. Don't ever do this. It was almost midnight, and I opened my email. And it's always a horrible idea, because normally your emails, sometimes you get good emails, but a lot of times they're challenging emails. And I got a challenging email about a situation that was just really heavy. And so, I'm trying to go to bed and sleep, and, I'm just processing through this, and I'm thinking through this. And I had been reading Psalm 34, getting ready for this week. And I just started quoting Psalm 34. I started quoting that, Lord, you are good. You give good things. And it started to just shift the whole atmosphere of where I was at. Because my situation wasn't changing. And it's the thing about opening an email at 11:30 at night is you can't do anything. No one's awake. It's not like you could solve anything. And so there was almost that moment of being like, there's nothing I can do about this. But I can take a minute and I can just start to respond to the Lord. I can start to just quote who he is and just listen as he speaks and just allow there to be that calmness that comes from him who is in control. I think the example in Scripture that probably a lot of us think about when we think about Jesus bringing calmness, Jesus bringing stability, is when the disciples were in the boat. And if you remember the story, Jesus and the disciples get in the boat, and Jesus had been ministering, and so he does what a lot of us do when we've been exerting ourselves. Jesus takes a nap. So he's in the front of the boat, and he's napping, and his disciples are taking the boat across the sea, and all of a sudden a storm comes, and it's chaos. Everything is crazy, the wind, the waves, and it was bad because a lot of these guys were fishermen, and they were freaking out. They were saying, okay, we're going to die. And so Jesus is sleeping at the front of the boat, and they go and they wake him up, and they say, don't you care that we're going to die? Don't you care that we're perishing? And Jesus rebukes them, and he says, hey, where's your faith? Where's your faith at? And then he gets up and he calms the storm and the waves. And in that moment, I don't think Jesus was being mean. I think Jesus was reminding them, hey, you forgot who's in the boat with you. You forgot that I'm right here. You don't need to panic when I'm here with you. The presence of the Lord in that moment was so close, they just weren't tuned into it. I think there's times in our lives where God he's right there. He wants to speak right into that situation, but we just aren't tuned in to what he's saying. We're so distracted by the wind and the waves. We're so distracted by everything that's happening that we forget, wait a minute. I need to take a minute. I need to tune in to his voice. I need to tune in to his perspective. In Philippians 4, this is the same chapter that we read earlier. Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. I love that Paul starts by saying, rejoice always, the Lord is near. And then he goes on to, don't be anxious. Bring your request to the Lord with thanksgiving, recognizing who he is. Bring your request to God. He is near. My wife and I are expecting our first child in just a few weeks here, so we're really excited for that. And like anything in life, when you are going into a season like that, you get a lot of advice, both asked for and unasked for advice about kids. And something that has come up is in this season, my wife and I, we both have full-time jobs. We feel like that's what the Lord has called us to in this season as we grow our family. And so we are looking at childcare. We're looking at, okay, what does it look like for childcare right now? And I had gotten some different thoughts from different people. It's good to get wisdom. It's good to get some different information, some different, even like studies and things like that. But one day I went down the rabbit trail where I started just asking ChatGPT some things. And you're laughing because you know where this is going. Going to ChatGPT and asking, and my ChatGPT, to be clear, you can set your tone of what you want ChatGPT to sound like. Do you want it to be encouraging? Do you want it to be direct? What do you want? And mine, I think it was the default, but mine was it's very encouraging. But it came back and it's giving me all these different studies. It's giving me all this different information, and I'm clicking on stuff and looking up things. And I got to the point where I had a ton of knowledge. I was like, okay, I'm set. Like, I've got a ton of knowledge about this. I really don't need any more information. But I recognized, okay, that knowledge did not bring me any peace. Like, this did not help at all. You know, it's the same thing as, like, if you feel something medically wrong with yourself and you go on Google and you start Googling that thing, it never ends well. Like, it never brings peace. It never is like, oh, okay, good. It's probably not cancer. Like, it's, right? It's always the extreme. It's always the, oh, no, I'm dying. And I recognized, like, in that moment, I was so oversaturated with knowledge. I was so oversaturated with opinions, with ways of doing things. And what I really was craving, what I was really wanting, was just the Lord's presence. I just really wanted to know, okay, we're going to be okay. Like, it's good to have information, it's good to do your research, all those things. But so often what we really want when we go to those sources, when we're trying to figure something out, we can get all the knowledge. I mean, especially right now, there's never been an age like the one we're living in where you can get information about anything you want to get information about. And yet, this is the most anxious generation. Because we have all the knowledge, but we're missing out on his presence. When we take the moment, when we take the time, when we're walking through those situations to say, I am going to recognize that in this moment the Lord is near. That in this moment, as Matt shared earlier, as we draw near to the Lord, he draws near to us. There's that aspect of, hey, his presence is available. It's there. No matter where you're at, no matter what you're walking through, no matter what your situation is, it's there. You can draw near to him. And as you draw near, anything that you're going through can be brought to him. He can hold anything that you're carrying. Colossians 1, and starting in verse 15, it gives this beautiful picture of who Jesus is. And this morning, I wanted to take some time just to read through it, because there's something about when we remember who this God is, when we remember the God that we're placing our hope in, it brings us confidence, it brings us joy, because we recognize this isn't just a good teacher, this is the creator of the universe. So Colossians 1, verse 15, Paul writes, and he says, he is the image of the invisible God. So just take that one phrase right there. He is the image of the invisible God, the God that created the universe, the God that designed atoms to work, and the stars, and the birds, and the water, all of those things. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or dominions, or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. This is who you have an invitation to abide in. This is who you have an invitation to remain in. This is who Jesus is. And as we journey with God, sometimes we, especially those of us that have followed Jesus for a long time, we just need to take a step back and just recognize who he is. We need to take time and we need to sit with a passage like Colossians and recognize, wow, you are the creator. Everything was created through you and by you and for you. And just allow the magnitude of that to settle in your spirit. That this is the God that I am invited to be in relationship with. That he is the creator. He's the one that is holding the whole universe together, and he knows me. He knows my name. Because of what Jesus did, I have access anytime I want to be able to come into his presence. I have access anytime I want to be able to bring anything that I'm carrying to him. Anytime. No matter what it is. This is what our host rests on. It doesn't rest on some good stories and some life lessons. It doesn't rest on having the right knowledge about the right things. It rests on Jesus, who is near. A God who revealed himself to humanity through the person of Jesus. Worship team, you guys can come up. This morning, we had several different words shared throughout pre-service prayer and also Jess's word here. And something that I was just really sensing as I was preparing for today was that for some of us, we are holding something that we are not meant to hold. That we are holding something that we are not meant to hold. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's finances, maybe it's your kids, maybe it's what the next step in your future is, but there's something that we're holding that we need to give to the God who holds all things together. To trust that he can hold that thing. And sometimes we try to solve stuff on our own. Sometimes we try to figure out, we go to ChatGPT, we go to those things to try to figure out how do I solve this? How do I make this work? And I think so often we just need to sit with the Lord and we need to listen for his voice, listen for his direction. And then we need to take intentional time and say, I give everything and everyone to you. I give you this situation. I give you this problem, this stress, this anxiety that I have because I recognize that I need you to hold this. And as we take the time to do that, we can experience the calmness and the peace of the Lord in those moments. Like that pilot's voice that comes on and just kind of settles things. The environment may not change, but we change because we start to see through our environment, through our circumstances, to the God who holds all things together. There are those times when we need to learn how to walk with the Lord who is sufficient enough, who's done enough, that we can rest in what Jesus has done, knowing that he is in control. So I'm going to invite us this morning, right where you're at. We will have prayer ministers coming up as well, but right where you're at, to take a minute with the Lord and just release. If there's anything that you feel like, I have been holding on to this. And I mentioned John Eldridge before. He has a practice that I've used quite a bit where it is just as simple as saying, Jesus, I give everything and everyone to you. And sometimes I have to repeat it like 5 or 6 times and start naming specifically the things that I'm releasing. But there's something about actually verbalizing and saying, Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. I cannot carry this. And I'm going to trust that as I give you things, you are going to show me the best way to steward that situation. You're going to teach me how to steward that conversation, how to steward my future, how to steward my finances. I'm going to learn from you how you would have me do things. And as we release those things and as we listen for the Father's voice, I believe he's going to speak to you with the way in which to go. And so we're gonna take a minute as we go into worship here to do that. I encourage you, if Jess's word spoke to you and you need to do a response this morning, if you've never made the decision to follow Jesus before, today is the day to do it. Today is the day to do it. Make that decision to make him the Lord of your life, to follow who he is. And if you want to make that decision, I encourage you. Jess said you could pray with her, or we'll have prayer ministers up here. You can pray. We would love to talk with you about what a relationship with Jesus looks like, what it means, and to pray with you. Or if there's something this morning you recognize, hey, I've been carrying something and I need someone to stand with me as I release this. I need someone to stand with me as I walk through this. We'll have prayer ministers up here. They would love to pray with you through that. Or if there's anything else this morning, if you need healing, if you need encouragement, if you're just saying, I really just want to hear a word from the Lord this morning, I encourage you. Our prayer ministers, part of what they do is they listen to hear what is God speaking that they can pray, that they can communicate out. And so invite you to come up if that's something that you desire this morning as well. So prayer ministers, you can come up. We're going to go into some worship here, but I just encourage you, take a moment with the Lord, and anything that you are holding on to, just release to him. And we'll spend some time just worshiping Jesus together.
Thank you so much for watching this teaching. I hope that it impacted you in some way. If you enjoyed this teaching and would like more teachings like this, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel and get updated each time we post a new sermon.